just ask a little bit, just going back to you and your personal story, because you really, you really share it in the book, and got a beautiful voice, because I've been listening to it on Audible as well. And tell us what it was like, sort of, because I think you said you realized you had anxious attachment style, and tell us what that was like, and through your first marriage, and how have you, because I know the second part of your book is about healing. So how did you recognize what was going on to realize that this is something playing out? It's hard, isn't it, to go, okay, this is me playing out stuff from my childhood, or this is just an external thing that's happening. I mean, obviously, you're a therapist, so you've got a lot of knowledge. How did you work out what was going on, and how did you kind of change and put a stop to it? And was it too late for your marriage?
Yes, it was too late for my marriage, but I would say that I went to imago therapy with that partner, and that opened my eyes to how much was actually playing out that was mine to heal. And it was eye opening because he was doing really bizarre things and he kept breaking up with me. And I would have these visceral responses. Like I said, my gut would fall through the floor. I was an anxious mess. It was horrible. And I started to learn that that had more to do with me and my wiring and what was going on with me, which of course anybody, well, someone in my nature becomes neurotic to trying to understand that. And I think we can understand it logically. But in order to heal it, we have to bring those visceral responses and all of that pain and all of those experiences to someone's nervous system who isn't avoidant, who can hold it. And that usually comes up with a therapist or a friend that actually can be present in the experiences that we're having as we start to heal. It's very important that that's a big piece. And I think the book gives the reader a lot of agency, because whether you're in a relationship or not, it's actually your relationships that are flashlights in. And then you can bring those experiences to someone who has the capacity to heal what you maybe couldn't heal in the relationship. And so that was a big piece. So it doesn't matter where you are, single, married, miserable, happy. If you know that some of this stuff comes up, you could bring awareness around it, and you can bring it to anyone who is worthy of holding that space and is non-judgmental, warm, and receptive. And you can start the healing process, which I just found so liberating.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah. So were you able to explore it with him and say, look, this is what's happening. My anxious style is playing out. That's pushing you away, so that you could both sort of work it out, or was that just not possible?
Um, it was not possible. I think that in hindsight, there might have been more awareness. I think in the moment when two systems are in fear without an adult in the room helping navigate it
Yeah.
enough, it can be very, very hard. With narcissism in general, because their defense mechanisms are so much the problem is you, or the problem is outside of me and exists um, in you. There's something wrong with you or something wrong with what you're doing, and it makes me really uncomfortable. They constantly want to change you versus what is really going on with me. And you have to remember that we meet people developmentally that are at the same wounding as us. And, I try to be careful with the word narcissist, because we equally have an earlier wound too. So there's a chance that both woundings are going to come up in the relational space, and they're intense and they're really hard. And without a lot of work, a lot of help, it can be very hard to get to the other side of that. And so it's really great when a couple can get in there and get some traction. If someone is very narcissistic, they have such great protectors in there to never really go to their pain or their suffering or the void, that it's a lot more challenging of a relationship. They don't want to be vulnerable at all.
So do you think it's not, because obviously I think you say in the book as well, but it's banded around a lot, the word narcissism. But like do you think a narcissist can, I mean, I know a couple, and there is absolutely no self-awareness, absolutely none. Like, they cannot reflect. They don't have the ability to go, what is my part in this? It's absolutely zero, to the point where I've gone, you just accept them where they are. This is never, ever going to change. There's part of me that feels that that's quite sad. I mean, do you think that narcissists can heal, can change? Because I think you sort of say in the book, get out. If you're with a real full blown narcissist, it's best to get out of the relationship. Is that true?
So I think that that's never a decision that a therapist should make, but if you're so dysregulated on a regular basis and only
Yeah.
one of you wants to do the work, it can be very damaging to your nervous system
Yeah.
and very traumatic. And so you are the one that has to determine that, and that timing of that is complicated. And there's a big difference between avoidant and narcissistic.
Yes.
So, and I think it's important, if you're not getting anywhere and you keep having the same, if they're not open to help, I think that's like, I think narcissistic people, and I think anxious people can be avoidant too. They're avoiding their own abandonment wound, right? They want to seek closeness. They have all these strategies. So everybody's avoiding something. But if you're with a person, it's a two-way street. It takes two to do the work. And if your partner can't do the work, it's not that you're giving up on them. It's, what are you going to do when someone doesn't have the capacity or doesn't feel safe enough to do the work? You're going to sit there and struggle. You can only use the struggle to look inward and do your own work. But at a certain point, you can't make somebody else do their own inner work. And when that happens for them, and it can very much happen for them, it's on them. And when they're ready to do that, and if they're ready to do that, and a big piece is that they feel safe enough, because a lot of healing happens when we let in safe enough people to hold us. And so if they didn't have the experience of safety or really scared of being vulnerable, they'll have a lot of protectors and they might never want to go there. And who are we to say that they have to? Right? That's the controlling part of an anxious person. You'll always, myself included, you need therapy, you need help, because if you can get help, then I can get calm. And, that's still outsourcing our sense of calmness to someone who might not be in a place where they're willing to get help. And that just comes down to an acceptance.
And does it feel like there are more and more narcissists out there? And what kind of upbringing creates a narcissist?
Narcissism is on the rise, and I think emotionally unavailable parents, and this is epigenetic and intergenerational trauma that we're looking at, and how parents show up, which isn't parents' fault, but focusing so much on the outside and not being curious on the inside has to do with their upbringing. So this is how it gets passed down generationally. And then the messages that are out there around. I know I got the message, be independent. So I have a very independent protector. People think I'm super independent. It wasn't until I got vulnerable and I was like, I need a lot of help, from a lot of different places, and I don't have to do anything alone. It wasn't until I really realized that I had the messaging of like be a badass, like be independent, be autonomous, be successful. And all those messages hurt me when it came to understanding what we really need to heal, and how much we really need interdependency, and how much I really needed to learn how to depend on the right people. So we're not giving those messages out collectively. We're giving the fairy tale, Sleeping Beauty, all these other messages, or be a badass, independent boss babe, right? And so none of the messages are like, wow, we need community. We need, connection is our biological imperative. We need to learn how to rely on healthy people. It's okay to reach out for help. You're actually normal with everything that you experience. You're not supposed to live alone. Like, we're supposed to be so much more interactive. Like, unless we start to shift and slow down and really kind of communicate what we biologically need, what the science shows us that we need, we're just sending out the wrong messages to many people. And a lot of people are left very, very confused and really struggling on how to heal.
That's really interesting. And are there differences with genders? So are men more likely to be avoidant and women more likely to be anxious, or is that changing? How does it work with the gender bias?
Probably, but I would say that it's really challenging for men in general, because the bias is that women can have feelings. Women can, they're raised in a culture where you have to have a stiff upper lip. It's not okay for boys to cry. It's not okay for you to express your emotions. So they actually have a much harder path. And I wrote my book for women because women are more likely to buy the book. But the truth is, I'm so happy that so many men have bought the book and are reaching out and are talking to me and kind of talking about their healing. They actually have a harder road because of how they're set up to not welcome their feelings and what society really places as a projection onto them. So they can be more avoidant, but it's probably a mixture. And overall, they have a harder path towards healing because there's more stigmatism.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also, I mean, I think what I loved about your book as well is that, I found it very spiritual, and, you really sort of believe that every, relationship is there to kind of teach you something, which is a really nice way of looking at it, and sort of looking at your mistakes and going, what did I learn? I think what I struggled with, going back to the childhood. So I started, because obviously Loretta and I were brought up together. There's a brother in between us, and then we've got another brother. And we had an okay childhood. There was nothing, especially traumatic. But obviously, we've had Gabor Mate on, and he talks about small T trauma and how it all builds. And I sort of realised maybe my childhood wasn't as normal as I thought. But I found it hard to kind of work out. I think you talk about core wounds, like what to heal. Like I don't remember, and obviously, as you said, it's from when we're very young, like in the womb, the first sort of few years. Like I tried to sort of look back and go, what is it that I need to heal? But I just kind of didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of what we store as memory early on isn't what you think of as memory. So from like womb to 4, it's sensation. So when you're feeling sensation in your body, that's sometimes an indication of where the wound is. And sometimes the wound doesn't have a story. It just has a feeling.
Right.
Or a felt sense, or a tightening, or a heaviness, or feel like shame, like can feel sticky, and you don't know why. You're like, where did this come from? I want to locate it. And it's like, that is it. That's what a baby stores as memory before we develop more of our ability to store explicit memory, like a movie script. Yeah. So often we track the charge, or we start to notice where the charge is. That's why somatic work and body work and understanding what's coming up in our day-to-day that's touching our internal experience and where is it living in our body is a much bigger indicator of little me, because little me doesn't have the memory in terms of, oh, I remember when my dad did this, or maybe she does or he does, but the sensation speaks so much louder, and that's literally the memory. And getting people to really understand, like when you're fighting with your partner and all these sensations are coming up, there's a little me memory in there saying danger, danger, or fear, or pain, or whatever. Getting them to really understand that that's a big layer into what goes on in relationship dynamics is kind of an awakening process. I even like to change the word, and I've learned to change the word trigger to awakening. It's like every relationship awakens something in you. And I think when God, and I know if you're listening to this, because I've been there, you don't want to look at like a hard relationship as like, oh, a lesson. But I think when you do some of the healing and you actually feel like, okay, this opened up something inside of me, and I'm able to kind of grow and learn about what this activated and make this so much more than the relationship, connect this so much deeper, then you start to see, okay, this relationship woke up all of this pain inside of me, and that pain already existed as well inside of me. And then you can start to connect the dots. And if you heal, and as you start to heal, it does reach a point where there's some gratitude. But it does take a little bit. It's like, what, gratitude for my suffering? It's like when your suffering gets held, there's a big opening that happens up inside. So it's a process. It's a journey to get to a place where you can really be grateful for all your relational experiences.
I think that's really, really that's actually really touched me, because one of my biggest relationships, I actually got, you talk about that. I mean, I really went for it. You talk about the attachment style and your nervous system. That was when I got sick. I got a severe autoimmune disease, but I was in fight or flight every day, basically. And I can look back now, and I can hold responsibility for, putting myself in that position. But the question that I've asked myself, and that you've helped me sort of start to unanswer it, and we're talking a good 10 years later, and I feel upset talking about it, is you just sort of think, why did I put myself in that position? I see myself as a really strong person, but I must have had, some lack of self-love to put myself in that position. I mean, I got myself out of that position, which I'm grateful for. And I am grateful for some of my suffering, because it started a big, long process to get well physically, which obviously, you know, can heal you sort of emotionally as well. But it was always that question, wasn't it? It was always not, you know, Loretta and I have debated it, like, why did I put myself in that position? And I didn't realize perhaps there was much more going on of my little me, as you talk about in the book. Sorry, we keep talking about little me, and probably the listeners don't know what that is. But you know, the little me, that little child inside of me was playing out by exposing myself to, you know, such a toxic relationship, really. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to understand that.
Yeah, I think that so there's a lot of memories. And so if little me was really desperately trying to get back into connection with someone who couldn't get in connection, she becomes disorganized and dysregulated and stress cycles. And maybe there was intermittent connection or not connection at all. And she kept trying to prove her worth outside of her. It's very hard when you're in that state to have an adult self be like, this isn't okay. I need to see this from the third part, because you're in a very regressed state that's like in a survival stance. And you're so not alone. I can personally totally relate. I remember leaving a relationship and thinking, oh my God, like all I really want to do from now on is protect my nervous system. And so when we're constantly in a state of dysregulation, we're trying to seek connection in the adaptive ways that we learned how. And those often are the ways that keep us stuck in a toxic relationship. And there is absolutely no shame in that. It's compassion for that part of you that didn't know any better. She was doing the best she could in that situation. She had blinders on to some degree. And I think when you really start to look at, okay, well, those were my adaptive strategies. Who can blame me for trying? You probably genuinely love the person as well. It sounds like you still do love the person. It's very hard to let go of someone that you love who's not good for your nervous system. And I think that when we can't get back into connection, we act out we have behaviors, we act things out. And when we're suffering a lot, we can have a lot of inflammation in the body. We can have a lot of somatic symptoms show up. And when that happens, we get sick. And so it is really frustrating to look back and be like, well, why did I keep myself in a situation that kept me sick? And it's like, we do. As human beings, we try to get back into connection with someone that we have a deep bond with for a long period of time in hopes that we will get what we need. And that's an infant, young person's, think about a baby. They don't have a choice. So they're there with mom and dad, and I'm sure your parents are wonderful, but maybe one of them was locked in a sympathetic state or not fully present. And so the baby's desire is just to keep reaching out, keep reaching out, keep reaching out, keep reaching out until you burn that out and you're like completely exhausted and you're like, this isn't working anymore. They don't have an option for like another parent or another safe place. So that desire is very, very, alive in that child. So that's essentially what goes on in a lot of relationships. And I remember leaving this relationship and I thought, gosh, I really love this human. I love this human so much, but they are so not good for my nervous system. And I think the older or the wiser we get, we start to realize what feels good on my nervous system. And I'm not saying we can't get dysregulated or we can't have ruptures or we can't work through things. We do. But if something's so havoc on my nervous system, I need to go talk to someone to see what is coming up for me. And I need to move away from things that are really not good for my body or mental health.
I think also women, we have a danger zone from about 30 to 40 where our lens is, I'm looking for the father of my children.
Yeah, that didn't help.
And that doesn't help our sense of decision making. I remember I felt that very much so. And I always say to myself, would I have married my husband if I was in my ex-husband in my early 20s? Probably not, if I'm being really honest. I think I really wanted to have kids. And I convinced myself that
this one's got to work.
Yeah. If I'm being really honest,
Yeah, I mean, I'm so not alone in that. I mean, we're out there in the world and we have an agenda and it's like we have this desire to have children or whatever the desire is, and we see the opportunity and that desire might override some of the other things. And probably anybody who's listening and just about everyone who has an experience like that, where their agenda of what they desired override their intuition or overrided what was really going on inside of them because they wanted that so badly.
Yeah.
And then I think sometimes there's no mistake about who we partner with. And the more we heal, the more that might change. But if you had little souls on the planet with that person, it kind of can give a little bit of meaning that I wouldn't have this soul without that other person. So sometimes it makes sense later on for some people, I think.
Yeah, and also as well,
Sometimes
I have my wonderful son, and obviously I don't have any regrets on any of it, but I do question it only so I can heal, so I can work out maybe I'm I'm not as secure as I thought I was, because as you said, it's a two-person thing. I put myself in that position, and I kept myself in that position for quite a few years.